do love Christmas. Yeah, I know, shocker, right? Anybody who's heard me preach or been around me for more than 5 minutes has probably picked up on that. You know, the joke is that I'm affectionately known as Mr. Christmas. And in some certain circles, that's a little bit of a disaffectionately known as Mr. Christmas. But there are different reasons for why I like Christmas. And I will start this morning in this series. I know it's early December, but I'm just going to go ahead and read from Luke chapter 2. And I love all that there is in the Word about the Christmas story, but I especially like reading this particular part. If I'm reading the Christmas story at a Christmas dinner or something like that, this is what I'm going to read. So let's just pick it up. Right here, Luke chapter 2, verse 1. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria. And all went to be registered to his own town. And Joseph went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth to Judea, the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and the lineage of David. He went there to be registered with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. And I'll stop there just for a quick second. There's a lot of information in there. And you know, you've heard it maybe, even if you don't have a long history with church or with God, you've watched maybe some of the older Christmas cartoons, and so you would have heard the Christmas story. Maybe you heard a bit of it from Linus in the Charlie Brown movie, right? He picked it up a little bit later in this same Luke narrative. But maybe it just feels almost like a script, right? Because there's so much detail in there. Is that detail necessary? Is it actually a part of the story? And it is. In fact, the details in the Christmas story are some of the greatest evidence to the fulfilled prophecies about the conception. Doesn't even just start with his birth, but the prophetic speaks in the Old Testament almost 360 times, and I could give a specific number, but it just sort of depends on how you interpret some of the prophetic, but roughly 360 times prophetically about the conception, the birth, and there were so many things around the birth that are laid out in this, like that he would come from Bethlehem. Oh, Bethlehem, you would be the one that would be blessed, right? The Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. Well, look at the details in this story that were a part of making that come true. Because there was this timely census that caused Mary and Joseph to have to travel. I always joke about this, but 94 big-time pregnant donkey-riding miles from Bethlehem. From Jerusalem or Nazareth. I'm going to get this right. From Nazareth to Bethlehem. I mean, they just didn't casually make that journey when this woman was 9 months pregnant. You understand what I'm saying? It was on purpose. It was a part of the prophetic being fulfilled in the life of Christ. The Christmas story is amazing evidence, not just of the love that God has for us, but that God exists and that he is real. And the probabilities that all those prophecies would come true is astronomical. But this passage is just loaded with so much necessary information. And in fact, Luke, who was a physician, who wrote this narrative, this piece of it, gives us detailed information about who was the governor, so that even extra biblical history could identify the time when Christ was born. Let me carry on. And while they were there, somebody say while they were there. Man, if you ever been a lady that was at full term carrying a baby, you was like, while they were there, hallelujah. You know what I'm saying? Like, glad we didn't have to ride back home. The time came for her to give birth. And she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger. Again, more fulfillment of prophecy. Some of the prophecies spoken 700 years before the event because there was no room for them in the end. And the real point of me reading that is just sort of to kind of help us catch up with December and get ourselves in a Christmas mindset. We have the amazing nativity that our own Chad Bowie, I mentioned last week, painted there on the wall, an amazing mural. But just to kind of get ourselves into that space, and Dondi, this last week, some of us went over to R.W. and Nellie Underwood's house. They live over, I don't even know exactly how to explain to you where they live. They live in southern Brunswick County on just off the waterway. And Nellie, if there is a Mrs. Christmas, she's it. You know what I'm saying? Like, wow. Christmas lights, incredible. It literally going into their house was like walking into a snow globe. Like someone said, man, I'm just waiting for somebody to shake this thing up, right? I mean, it was incredible. Every room was loaded with nativities and antiques and then fresh design. There were enough stockings in there for the church, man, everybody. I'm telling you, if you're a part of 828 South, she would love for you to come by. I'm not going to give her address, but just hit her up today, because she does love to show all of the beautiful things that she's collected now for over 40 years. And she said she starts on November the 1st decorating. But we went with McKinley, our 6-year-old that we get to love so much, and she went with Mimi and I, and we walked in the front yard, which was, again, loaded with decorations. And they have a beautiful nativity, Bill. And when we walked in the front yard, McKinley stood there and she looked at that nativity and she said, now that's what Christmas is about. Right? I mean, she was looking straight at baby Jesus in this amazing nativity. And at the end of it, I love Christmas, a first point for impact this morning, because of who and what Christmas is about. Just so you know. In fact, the reason I wrote that devotional that's at the Connection Hub here and at South is because I wanted to make sure that all of this, back and forth banter that I have with so many people about Christmas the entire year and about how I listen to Christmas music most of the year and all those kinds of things, that no one was conflicted or confused about why I love Christmas. It's not because I love gifts. It is one of my 5 love languages, but it's easy to love me, as the kind of running joke about that. But gifts isn't so much the thing as it is just the personal connection that's connected to a gift, honestly, even as it relates to gifts. But it is actually more just that this season we get to emphasize what should matter most all year long. And there are people who are offended by the fact that Christmas is so commercial, and on some level I get that, but honestly I'm not so bothered by it. I think it's incredible that the birth of our Savior is the most significant worldwide holiday on the planet. And I'm fully aware that not everyone celebrates it, but I'm saying it is still the most significant worldwide holiday. And if that causes there to be a commercial boom, then, so be it. But let's make sure that we, right, remember. Now, I do like, I said a second ago, I do really enjoy Christmas music. Well, I listened to the Little Drummer Boy a couple of times on the way to church this morning. And some Third Day Christmas, which is one of my all-time favorite albums, period. Just go look it up. You'll be happy with yourself if you do. I love Christmas movies. Anybody? And let me be more specific. So there was a season in my life where I really was doing well with just watching like Hallmark movies and stuff, because I really love spending time with Karen. But I've more recently adjusted to find other ways to spend time with her, because I sort of reached my capacity for Hallmark Christmas movies. I thought I was going to be good for the rest of my life, but I can watch a couple per season. Her capacity is much greater than mine. So let me be more specific. I love old Christmas cartoon movies. So some of you just left me right then. All those ladies that raised their hand were like, okay, I didn't know that's what we were talking about. Can I take my vote back? Can I pull my hand back down? And one of my all-time favorites is A Charlie Brown Christmas. Come on now. And I love the whole fact that CBS went to Schultz and asked him to write this Christmas special from the Peanuts. And they hadn't done that before. It was kind of risky. Peanuts had only existed on paper. But that Charlie Brown Christmas was released the year of my birth, actually, and not very long before. It first aired December the 9th, 1965. But one of his mandates was, if he was going to create this Christmas special, it would be about, come on somebody, it would be about Jesus. And again, I said a second ago, Linus actually reads or quotes, I should say, from Luke chapter 2, and I love lots of others too. I mean, I like a lot of the claymations that honestly are just real Christmassy, but, and you can guess where I'm going here, singularly my favorite is the Little Drummer Boy. I would put Charlie and the Little Drummer Boy right there, honestly, together. I don't think I could pick a one or a two, but I put them together. But this claymation that was produced and released it was 3 years after I was born. It was released on December the 15th, just a couple of days, like 3 or 4 days before my birthday. I could be specific with that, too. It sounds like I don't know how to count or when my birthday is. It's 4 days before my birthday. So I was 3 years old, essentially, when it was released. And it's an incredible story, assuming you've seen it. They don't show it as much as they do a Charlie Brown Christmas, and it's not, a little harder to find. But I would encourage you that the story has relevance. And there are, I understand there are Christians that don't like it. Well, it's not biblically accurate. It's like a lot of the other metaphors that we use to describe the walking relationship we can have with God. They don't have to be specific or explicit. I love what God's doing right now through The Chosen. And they've just extrapolated and, reimagined some of the ways that the story might have lived in the context. And that's kind of what's happening here with the little drummer boy. Just to bring you up to speed real quick, Aaron is the main character. He's the little boy that was orphaned. His parents had given him a little drum to play. And then shortly after that, a band of marauders and bandits came through, and he was orphaned. And he set off with 3 of the livestock that survived, right? There is a donkey that was named Samson, and there is a camel named Joshua, and there was a little lamb named Baba, right? And as they were traveling across the desert, they were essentially enslaved to perform by Ben-Haramid, but they eventually escaped. But the point in all of that is that eventually they encounter the 3 wise men that are on their way, right, to the nativity. Now, I understand that the Bible helps us to know in Matthew that the wise men showed up 2 years later. So don't think that I'm biblically illiterate as it relates to the Christmas story. I'm not bothered by the fact, though, that we usually put them at the nativity. We like to condense our paintings and such. It's fine. Y'all just relax a little bit, right? But in this story, they encounter the wise men on the way, and he recognizes that there's something unique about these 3 kings. And so then when he chases them down, because basically Joshua's camel was with them, when he chases them down at the nativity, he and his other 2 animals, Baba the lamb, runs in front of a chariot and is hit. Anybody, y'all with me? Did you expect a recap of a cartoon this morning at church? You're welcome. And so he's carrying Baba, and he thinks, who can help? Who can help? His little lamb is going to die. And so he runs. He says, the kings. Yes, the kings. The kings, they're wise. They would know what to do. So he runs to one of the kings, and he says, you must help me, my lamb. And the king says, oh, son, right? I'm but an earthly king. But there is one king. And he looks back to the nativity. And Aaron says, the babe? Whew. I can't believe I just got choked up. Maybe I can't handle some more Christmas movies. Right? And so he says yes. And so he puts the lamb down, and he walks over with his drum. And then the song, we just did the song, Come, They Told Me. A newborn king to see, right? Our finest gifts to bring, to lay before the king. And that is again, I know this is a fictitious story, but that's a calling that each of us have. To come near to the God who came near for us. And then, as he approaches, the lyric in the song says, little baby, right? I am a poor boy too. I totally relate to that lyric in this song. Little baby, pa-rum-pa-pum-pum. I am a poor boy too, right? I have no gift to bring. How many of us feel that way, right? Like, what do we have? How could we possibly give anything that would matter to God in exchange for what he's given to us? I have no gift to bring that's fit to give a king. And then, of course, he has a bit of an epiphany. What I do have is this drum. So then the question, shall I play for you on my drum? And then, of course, Mary nodded, pa-rum-pa-pum-pum. The ox and lamb kept time. About some ox with rhythm. That was helpful in the story. I played my drum for him. And I love this. I played my best for him. Can you worship in that song? I don't know if it's politically correct, but it sure felt right before the Lord to me. Yeah, I played my best for him. And then he smiled at me. Me and my drum. The question for us, I think, is what to give, right? So in this series, we'll kind of look a little bit of what it means to play our drum for him. I will say to you that for me, let me back up and say that this way. I knew a kid once. I knew someone once who felt like that they were too insignificant to ever actually give anything to God or for God that would matter to God. I knew a little boy who thought he couldn't do anything honestly that mattered for God, and that little boy was me. I look of stories of other people of great faith that made incredible worldwide impact, and I know that they had similar stories. Billy Graham. On the day that Billy Graham actually went to be with Jesus, Karen and I happened to be outside of Charlotte, and I had planned to go to the Billy Graham Museum, and did in fact go the day of his death. And his entire life tells a story of the love of Jesus, but it started with him being someone who was grew up in a dairy farmer's home without any grand expectation. He almost didn't graduate high school, right? Went away to Bible college and didn't love it. Felt like it was too restrictive. I mean, there are a lot of people in this life who've done great and amazing, magnificent things, who at some point in their beginning felt like they probably didn't have anything to bring either. But what God asks for us is for us to give our best. Now, I know for some, though, that's a little bit of a trap too. Give your best, right? Remember that? That's like you get that and, maybe on your way out the door. Give your best, do your best, be your best. Does that feel a little demanding or intimidating to anyone? Maybe like, I don't know if I can do that. And it's Ecclesiastes 9:10 where Solomon challenged us, right, to do whatever we do, right, to do it hard, like to work heartily, to give our best to God. Paul gave that same sort of a challenge in Colossians 3:23 when he said, however you're living your life, live your life as if all that you do, you're doing for God, as unto, literally what he said was as unto the Lord. I mean, it's not just a cartoon that calls us to this sort of give our best to God. It is a biblical concept, again, that I think we're meant to embrace. But this is an important truth to consider. Gratitude, not comparison or competition, should motivate our service to the Savior. Another takeaway for us this morning. Hear me now. We just finished the gratitude series, so this is that segue from that series to this one. Understand what I'm saying right here. Not comparison or competition. My best got to be better than somebody else's best, and don't get too worked up on trying to define what best is. You know what I'm saying? Like, just give what you got to God and watch God. Even when Isaac was a little guy, I don't know, this came off a greeting card or something, but he heard it and he stuck with it. But he would say to people as a form of encouragement, I'm talking about like second or third grader Isaac, our son, he would say, do your best and leave the rest to God. Come on, that last part of that quotation is critically important. Because if we don't believe the leave your rest to God part of that works or makes what we have to hand to him enough, we'll withhold what we have. Because it'll never be enough. Y'all hearing me this morning? I'm preaching. I know I'm only preaching a little bit, but I'm preaching just a little bit. Right? And when we think about this concept of comparison, you understand this: comparison kills motivation. Like if you pre-decide that you have nothing to add to the kingdom of God, nothing to give to the king because you see others that you perceive have more, and there's no more or less, by the way. This doesn't work that way. It doesn't scale in that way. God doesn't do math like that. The interesting thing is what you have to give is exactly what God put in your hand. What do you have in your hand? Like, what has God made you to be? Now, if there is one important qualifier there, it's go be who God made you to be. We say, CJ is one of CJ and I's favorite, I think, ways to say this, but we consistently say only Jesus died for the right to speak to you about who you are. Because in a lost and broken world, we've sort of sold out that concept for something that's just not what God wants or wills for us. But if we will hear from him. I have a friend that always said, if you'll do what you can do, God will do what only God can do. You know what I'm saying? And he's next level able to take what we have and do something awesome in us and through us. And if we think again back to the Bible, there's certainly plenty of examples of that. I was thinking of different places where maybe we would say, okay, well, that was a pum moment in the life of someone from the Word. Think about David with his sling, right? Wasn't that long ago that Josh preached about David and Goliath? And you think about, I mean, he could have shown up and said, I have nothing here for this fight, right? Well, what do you got in your hand? I got a sling and some stones. God's always done pretty good with that before. I think I'll just roll with it. Come on, somebody, roll with it. Come on, pum. Y'all with me? Think about the little boy with the 5 loaves and 2 fish. Y'all know how much I love to talk and tell that story, right? And I don't believe anyone stole his lunch. I don't think that's how it happened. I don't think in a crowd that size that Andrew just even happened upon it. I think the little boy overheard the conversation and said, well, I got 5 loaves and 2 fish. What a ridiculous thing to say. Why even bring it up? It's such, by comparison, an insignificant investment compared to the incredible need. Why even bring it up? Pum. That's why. Pum. Because you bring what you have to him and you watch God work. The lady whose story will be told into eternity that brought her alabaster box and broke it to anoint the feet of Jesus. Or the lady, Jesus is overlooking the collection box in the temple, and he sees all these people that are giving only to be seen. And even those that are selling and manipulating the system to make money. And then there's this one little widow who comes and drops in 2 copper coins. And you know, I think it was a year and something ago that we did a series called Do the Math. And you could argue that Jesus was bad at math because in this moment he said, see, this woman put in more than all the rest. Pum. He smiled at her. Y'all with me? He smiled at her, but that's not really so much what the series is about, because I think there's an even greater lesson hidden in this colloquial Christmas story than those sorts of examples of this moment in time when you do something significant with the little that you have in your hand. I think there's actually something there's a deeper lesson that's hidden here that I don't want for us to miss, because when you think about the role, since we're talking about pum and we're talking about drumming, how about DeMarcus on the drum kit today? My gracious. And we already did one song, and he was killing it. And I know, Jake, if you're at South, you would have heard Jacob already on the drums there in that same song. And those guys and all the guys that drum for us are amazing, and they're important. But by the way, that's not insignificant. Like the drums role in music, and particularly a piece like that one that we just did, critical. Like if in drumming, they call it staying in the pocket. Like if he got out of the pocket, in other words, if his rhythm was off, if he wasn't keeping time, it's going to mess everybody up. Y'all with me? I mean, that entire composition that they just did, incredibly complicated too. Come on, they just did the For King and Country version of that song. All we needed was CJ on a big bass drum. We would have been set. I hope we get that worked out before the series is over. I just put some pressure on the worship guys. Yes, I did. But, I mean, the drums are rarely ever at the front of the stage. They're not a front stage instrument, and yet they're critically important to the laying of the foundation. Please try to follow me here, because this is important. They're critically important to the laying of the foundation and keeping the rhythm. Y'all following me here? Like when we pum, that's critically important for us. In the life song, right, that we are meant to sing, and we're not talking about vocalization here. We're talking about how we live. Learning to pum for God is incredibly critical to our laying a foundation and keeping the rhythm. And certainly there's a place for the gifted drummer to add to the melody in critical ways. And they do. I mean, these guys, they don't just add rhythm and foundation. I mean, the drum in and of itself often is incredibly important to the melody. And again, never more true than the song we just did. I mean, it was a big part of so much of what was happening in that song. So what I'm trying to do is not actually diminish its importance, but to highlight it. Because it's critical in every part. In fact, another takeaway for us is this. The best drumming goes largely unnoticed, even though it's critical to the on-point completion of the piece that's being played. And I want you to just kind of soak that in for a second, because again, I'm not just talking about music. Not so much, Chris, talking about music. I'm going to read it again. The best drumming, come on, stay with me here. The way you live your life, all right, right? The best drumming goes largely unnoticed, even though it's critical. All those little ways that you get to pum-pum-pum-pum, that you get to live into obedient, walk in relationship with God when no one else sees, when it seems only like it's in the background, it's laying the foundation, it's keeping the rhythm. Yeah, life has a rhythm. And when our rhythms are off in our walk with God, it creates chaos, which isn't a healthy place for faith to grow. Micah 6:8, one of the most quotable verses in the entire 36,000 plus verses in the Bible. Micah said this, He, meaning God, has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Pum-pum. Right? He's shown you what to do, to do justly, like to live into justice. Again, when no one is watching. Anthony, that's how we live. That's what we do. That's what we choose. No one chooses for us. God said, he wrote the piece. He was the creator of the composition. And he's given us a place and space to play. Do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. That's every day. That's an everyday rhythm. That's always keeping the beat. In fact, another on-screen point for you to consider, it's the everyday rhythms of faithful obedience that make for a life that resonates with redemption. That's today's big takeaway. That's what will be on the app. If you choose to take notes on the app, this is what you'll see there. It's the everyday rhythms of faithful obedience that make for a life that resonates. You want your life to resonate with redemption? Like the things that you touch are beautifully and miraculously redeemed, right? Want to see that? Then choose faithful obedience. Think about the subtle choices that make the music of our lives amazing. What are those subtle choices? One of our other amazing drummers, Mike. I mean, just got baby number 2. Woo! That's a game changer. I mean, Mike and Hillary. I don't need to put all that on Mike, right? But I mean, and when you start adding all these other elements, wow, this is pretty good. I wasn't sure, when you're putting a word together, but this is pretty good. When you start adding in all those other elements to your life song, it's the faithful rhythm, right, that will make it amazing. And you'll discover if you're out of the pocket. Like if your rhythm's off. Honestly, the word of the Lord for me, I don't know if you guys ever do this, but for Karen and I every year, and I would say the majority of our team, but we think about what's the word of the Lord, like a word that maybe we can focus on, that God wants us to focus on for the new year, which is coming in a big hurry, right? And what's the word of the Lord? And the word of the Lord already for me, I think, Rodney, looking into 2022 is just, it's pace and rhythm. Pace and rhythm, because I feel like, I go real fast, then I have to slow down, and I go real fast, and I feel like it's been a bit chaotic. Maybe the whole last 2 years have felt a bit chaotic. And that the word of the Lord, the challenge to me is pace and rhythm. And it was in Galatians 5:22 that we received some other drumming instruction when the Apostle Paul said the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, Love that one. Goodness, faithfulness. Oof. Can't put too much of a priority on faithfulness. It's impossible to put too much of a priority on faithfulness. It's so critically important. Just show up with Jesus. We say that a lot. Just show up, and show up with everything you have, right? And sometimes what you have is messy. Remember last week in the gratitude series, as we were landing it, I spoke about, if you weren't here, I'll catch you up to speed, but we just spoke about how it is even an act of gratitude to bring our hard stuff to God. Don't just try to bring the good stuff. Good gracious, bring everything you have to Him. In the case of the little boy in our aforementioned drummer boy story, his heart was full of hate. He came to the manger in this story. He came with a heart that was full of hate, but he came anyway. And the great miracle, his little lamb was in fact restored, but the great miracle was that his hate was replaced with love, because many of us have shown up at the feet of Jesus without feeling like we had anything good to bring, only bad. But what God does is a redemption that is unimaginably miraculous. And our part in it is incredibly simplistic. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace. These things don't seem all that significant, and yet they're a big deal. Kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And I think maybe often, in fact, we don't really understand the significance of something as simple as faithfulness. And not just faithfulness to God, though Rebecca certainly starts there, but just being faithful, again, in our relationships and the things that God's called us to do, or who God's made us to be. And I love stories that highlight the significance of faithfulness. And I was reading a blog post. It was written by someone she was a nurse, and she spoke about a day when she was in the clinic, and it was crazy. They were overbooked and busy, and Mike, there was a older gentleman that came in, and he had gotten stitches. He had an appointment for 8:30 to get the stitches out. It was about 8 o'clock when he came into the clinic, and he said, I really would like to get these out as quickly as possible because I have another appointment. And she said, well, sir, if you'll take a seat, I'll see what I can do, but we're already running way behind, and it's just been crazy around here already this morning. And he went and sat quietly, but she could see his, like he seemed like he was really hoping, and, you can kind of feel that on someone sometimes. And so she said she walked over and she just decided, well, let me just look at it real quick. And she took a quick look at it, and it had healed very nicely. So she went to one of the doctors who were, again, too busy to see him in the moment, and she said, hey, it looks great. I can certainly take those out. And so she was given the approval to do that. And as she was sitting with this man just in the waiting room, and there were no rooms available, just pulling out his sutures quickly for him, she said, so you have another doctor's appointment at 9? And he said, no, I'm actually going to see my wife in the nursing home, because every morning at 9 I go and I have breakfast with her. And she said, oh, well, we certainly don't want you to be late for that. Will she be looking for you? And he said, well, actually, she has Alzheimer's. And she hasn't recognized me for 5 years. And she said, so I asked him, why are you so determined when she doesn't remember you? And he said, because I remember her. Pa-rum-pa-pum-pum. Do you think God opened doors for Billy Graham to speak in the Kremlin because he was a great preacher? Because I don't. Another takeaway for us is this: redemption is a miracle that manifests itself more in the simplistic than the obviously supernatural. There's a miracle, and it doesn't just happen at Christmas. It's a beautiful redemption where God takes even the hurtful things, the hard things, the broken things, and He does something beautiful. But that miracle isn't released in something that's so obviously supernatural. It's in the simplistic, choices, and at the risk of being even more sappy and sentimental, one more story for you. So I say this often, if not always, but I'm from a family of 7, and for much of my childhood, my grandma, my dad's mom, actually lived with us as well, and her husband had left her. She was a hurt and broken woman on many levels. She lived with us, and we loved her being there, and we all loved each other. But I'm the youngest of 5, so I was the little guy. And honestly, we always had dogs. I'm just a good old country boy, and we always had dogs. And we never had cats because we had dogs. I didn't say dog. Anybody hear me say dog? I didn't say dog. I said dogs. That's a D-A-W-G right there, so y'all know. And so we had puppies. We often had puppies. And I don't know, I guess because I was tiny, I was small, wish I could get a little of that back, but I was real small most of my life too. I had this tremendous affection for puppies. And there's another story about a little boy there was a farmer who was putting up a sign on a fence post, and it said, puppies. He was putting up a sign that said puppies. And the little boy came up and he said, pulled on the guy's overalls, and he said, "Sir, I'd like to buy one of your puppies." And the farmer, they weren't actually for sale, but he said, "Well, these are going to be really expensive puppies. How much money you got?" And the little boy kind of hung his head, and he dipped in his pocket, and he pulled out, Mr. Ron, the change he had. He had 35 cents. And the man said, "Man, that is exactly how much these puppies will cost." So he whistled, and he yelled out, "Daisy." The mama dog, Daisy, came running out of the doghouse up the driveway. And all these little puppies came following her, these little fuzz balls. And the little boy's eyes are huge. He's watching the puppies run. And then, but a few seconds after all the other puppies had cleared the door of the doghouse, another puppy came kind of limping out. A small puppy. Was smaller than the rest. I had an affection, I will admit, for the runt of the litter. I always felt like I was the runt of the litter. There's a reason I love A Charlie Brown Christmas. I thought I was Charlie Brown. I like Charlie Brown. My sister was Lucy. Josh's mom was Lucy. They love each other. She pulled the football on me more than once. I thought I was Charlie Brown. I mean, we're the same age, me and Charlie. I always loved the runt of the litter. And the little boy saw that puppy coming out, and immediately he said, "I want that one." And the farmer said, why do you want that puppy? It's probably not good for you to have that one because you won't be able to run and play with it as much. It's the runt of the litter, and it may not be able to run with you in the field and things like these others would be able to do. And the little boy reached down and he pulled up his pant leg to reveal that he had a brace that went on each side of his leg. And he said, "I want that one because he's going to need someone that understands." And I love this because I want you to know that every broken part of our story redeems when we give what we've got to God. Parumpa-pum-pum. There's not anything in your hurtful past that can't be redeemed in your future if you will just step into this place of believing in the Messiah in the manger. Come on, parumpa-pum-pum. The worship team is going to join us on the stage here in Wilmington and at South. And again, back to our fictitious story, certainly has a huge connection to the Word of God. But when Aaron showed up at the manger, it wasn't just his lamb that experienced a miracle, but it was Aaron who found healing. A last takeaway for us is this: God will take your hurt and redeem it in a life song that provides healing for you and hope for others. Parumpa-pum-pum.